Well, welcome to the panel. I'm Terry Weerasinghe. I've been working in the music industry for over 20 years, holding senior positions at companies like Pioneer, Native Instruments, and Beatport, and I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer for Boiler Room. Today's panel will be based around the topic of diversity and intersectionality. Intersectionality, in simple terms, describes that more than one factor affects how people are discriminated against. It could be your race, your gender, whether you're able-bodied, your class, or your sexuality. When the label of intersectional is applied, it generally brings into the attention that a person is being discriminated for in an aspect that refers to their identity and therefore is even more compromised than in a normal situation. In my personal example, I'd be discriminated against because I'm a person of colour, but also because I'm an immigrant, and also because I've recently become a father. Aspects of my identity lead to preconceptions and unconditional bias that I have no control over. In today's panel, we're going to shine a light on 4 people from very different backgrounds who will share their experiences with us. One of those people will be here in around 5 minutes, but to start with, I'm going to pass over to Shamsa to introduce herself to everyone here.
Thank you so much, Terry, for having me. Thank you, Music Most Wanted. It's really a pleasure to finally get an invitation to the people who are in the between the lines to speak up and really reflect a side perhaps that is not yet shared in the city. My home today, Berlin. I'm Farah Albitar. I'm Jordanian. I'm 30 years old. I'm known by my artist name, or my general name here in the art world is Shamsa, meaning the sun. And it came about the feeling that it gave to my electronic community back home in Amman, where I first started and when I first decided to become a DJ and an events curator. I've been a DJ now for 6 years, learning, growing within the industry and within the culture itself here at home. On my right is another veteran of my home, my church, Berghain, where I grew. It didn't start there though. But nonetheless, a little background. I have been grown as a middle-class Arab, studied abroad. My introduction to Germany came through the German Jordanian University. I was in a very straight road to become the next diplomat, politician, exchange agent between Germany and Jordan. I have had started my way on that path, so I have a lot of background in that and in the business sector and logistics sector. So my background comes from diverse. I think this is where my intersectionality really lies. The pros and the cons of my identity is where I am today, why I'm here in Berlin today. I feel like the city of the free. I'm very happy to be sharing my story with you in hopes that this is the igniting conversation for many future, more important conversations that would bring much more truth beyond the digital and the commercial and the capitalistic world of the industry. Hopefully in igniting bigger, realer conversations about inclusivity. And I think my pros and cons is what's bringing me here today to speak to all of you. Thank you again for having me. I look forward to your many coming questions.
Thanks for being with us. Kenny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kenny. I run a company called Taboo. I'm from London. So my background is across brands and music. So I started my career as an Adidas intern in Herzogenaurach in Bavaria, where I studied, I was in the business intelligence department, but was like, actually, no, I don't want to be in that department. So I swapped and ended up being in the brand statement collaborations team, which deals with the collaborations of Kanye and Alexander Wang, etc. And then I ended up going home and joining PS, which is a record label in London, where I worked as a radio plugger and a PR. Then I moved to Berlin and joined the management team of Claptone. So yeah, thrown into the world of electronic music, which is a really, really great experience. We took them to their first Ibiza residency at Pasha. And then leaving that experience, I then went and started my own company, which is Taboo, which specializes in brand partnerships between musicians and brands. So I've kind of seen all areas of the music industry and experienced a lot of experiences, some good, some bad, some ugly. I'm sure I'll share a few of them with you guys today. But yeah, that's basically me.
Thank you. And finally, Kavan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation, Terry. My name is Kevin. I'm from Singapore. I've been Berlin-based since 2016. How do I say this? I've been involved in the industry since 1999, from a resident DJ in the first gay club in Singapore, to being a promoter, to running a club in Singapore, and now I'm a label owner and also work in Oscar Booking as a booking agent. Yes, and my intersectionality is that I am of a mixed race on top of being Asian, whereas people won't consider me to be a pure Chinese. So, yeah, that's my summary for now.
So our first three panelists that have joined us today have a lot of experience in the industry. Malcolm Gladwell came up with the 10,000 hour rule, which basically states that if you spend 10,000 hours practicing something, you're effectively a genius at it. So the three people that we've just had on stage have spent 10,000 hours doing what they're doing. So we have some geniuses who are going to talk about their experiences in the industry. And then our last panelist today is the future and represents the future and what we're striving towards. And so, Shani, could you please introduce yourself to everyone and tell them what you do?
Hey y'all, how you guys doing? I'm Shani, Atani. Apologies for the tardiness. I started in 2020. I jump-started my own format project called Through the Grapevine, where we aim to push artists from growing backgrounds. So I guess usually use underground, but I feel like that's kind of a play turn in a way. So definitely growing artists from different backgrounds, different places. We believe that just because you like techno doesn't mean you don't like hip hop, and really trying to express the intersectionality between genres and cultures to make sure that the artists that we do represent or do work with are getting the credits that they need, and that when we're trying to build a relationship of like mutual understanding. And started off like a radio show, visual radio show, what we're still pushing, but because of Corona, as we all know, there was a lot of hurdles that came with that in 2020, but we've evolved, and right now we try to concentrate on that first aim that we have in pushing artists from different genres and stuff like that. So if it's production, if it's radio, if it's marketing strategy, we're in that, you know? And it's been a slow grow because of the hurdles that we've had recently. I think we've all felt that, but it's been good. Hi, thank you for having me, first of all.
Super happy to have you, and you bring a very different perspective that we need to have, because we're in completely different places in our life to where you are right now, and actually everything we're doing is about your generation, so very important. I'm going to start with Kenny, and just as a broad question, I mean, you've had 10 years in the industry. Can you give us a wrap-up of how you felt treated? And obviously, you know, you've gone from taking a very traditional role, which is how I pursued my career, and then turning it all around and doing it all yourself. Do you want to just give us a rundown of why and how you came to do that? And
Yeah, sure. So I tried the very traditional way of getting into the industry, which I guess I succeeded at. But it wasn't easy. I sent a lot of applications begging people to work for free, and realized that nepotism is really a thing. And so the way to find a job is to find someone inside the place that you need to get the job, essentially. And so I met a woman called Jane Third, who used to run Because Records, and she basically just had my back and brought me through into the industry. But I was the first black woman, I think, ever to work at Pias, which is a very yeah, it was interesting. Like I think I'm a pretty I call myself an extroverted introvert. Everyone says I'm confident, but only confident when I'm like comfortable. And it was an interesting place to work because for me, I never saw my like color as a barrier. I never saw my color in terms of my place in music. But when you get to an independent record label, your color is definitely like very clear, especially when choosing which projects you're going to work on and where you're going to be placed, which was a bit uncomfortable for me, and something that I had to sort of educate the people around me on, and kind of had a few uncomfortable conversations, just where I was. I mean, it was fun. I was starting out and I was put into all the really big meetings. I was having dinner with artists because I was the face of diversity and inclusion. But it was also weird because why am I there and not my other counterparts? And why are you not bringing me in to the meetings that matter? Why am I just showing face, if that makes sense? So when I left and joined the management team for Claptone, it was definitely a different experience, especially working a lot remotely. So I wasn't in an office. There wasn't microaggressions, etc. Until I went to Ibiza, and then I was again faced with, there's a black woman running the show, and everyone thought I was the driver or the cleaner or whatever. I'm not really sure what they thought I was, but they definitely didn't think that I was a person that they needed to talk to. So that was, again, this thing of like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't really realize, and now I'm being faced with it. And obviously, I think I was 23, 24 doing this residency, so I was really young, and I was staying in a villa. Okay, so it wasn't like the most horrible situation, but I was staying in a villa in Ibiza by myself, running a residency, no family, no friends, and then feeling really alone because you're the only black woman, and that wasn't the nicest experience. And that's where I was like, okay, I want to make sure nobody experiences this, and no one has to put up with this. Essentially, why I kind of started my own company to kind of be to kind of like show people that you can do it yourself as well. Like if you're in a system that is broken, you can fight to fix it, or you can just create a new system. And there's lots of, I guess, like organizations and help that you can have from people around you. I guess this new word, allies, is the buzzword of the year. But there's also allies who do see your issues, who do see your struggles, and can admit to being complicit in the fight for diversity, and will kind of back you and create more space for you. I'm also part of this community organisation called the Black Music Coalition, which is based out of London, I guess, or England, which is mainly for the UK music industry, and trying to find ways to hold the music industry more accountable for their treatment of black musicians and black staff. And so it's like working with a lot of, and I'm on the independent arm, so I sit on the committee there, and we're working with a lot of labels and having conversations and educating them about how we can actually make change, because we can sit here and we can talk and we can talk and we can talk, but what's actually happening in your label, in your booking agent, on the stage, even in backstage, like how are people being treated as they're walking through the door, and how are you changing these sort of unconscious biases, because that's what I like to call it. They're there, and people are like, I'm not racist. It's okay, you're not racist. But structurally, you have been taught to prioritize this white person over this, or just this white person. It's not even over anything. You don't even realize that you're treating this black person badly, because all you see is that you're treating this white person well. And that's the issue that we just need to see, is that just to get to people to understand and realize that what has been like instilled in us intrinsically and structurally, and how we can just like start changing things.
I guess what one question that I would have is, so you went through working in all of these scenarios where you were carrying out roles in places where you felt compromised. What was the thing that twisted in your head that finally made you think, I'm going to go and do this on my own, and then make your own successful company like you have?
I guess kind of like it was a bit of a necessity. And also, also one of my really good friends who's a white male who was like, you've got this, Kenny, and I'm going to help you do it. And so he was definitely the cheerleader in the background being like, you can do this because you have this and that experience. He works in tech, it's nothing to do with my industry. There's nothing to do with the music industry at all, and has no experience in that. But he's like, you've worked in these places, you've got the experience, you can do it. If anyone else can do it, why can't you do it? So go and do it. And I was like, okay. And it came from just like, I don't want to get people to be comfortable with me. I just want to be comfortable straight away from the offset. So why are you going to try and go into a new institution and try to get people to get to your level? Just like create a space that is on your level already. I'm not saying everyone should go and like be an entrepreneur or a startup owner, because it's very difficult. But but I just think like try and find spaces or areas where you do feel supported. And like I used to dance when I was younger, I played football. I've been in lots of teams. So if you can find solace in your teams and they can give you the encouragement to do whatever it is that you need to do, just make sure that you have some cheerleaders, some teammates, and in whatever spaces you can find them in, to make sure that you feel empowered doing whatever you're doing in whichever way that plays out. So yeah, that's that.
I'm not going to focus too much more on it, but in a couple of occasions here, Kenny mentioned that she had enablers, so people who believed in her that helped her to get to where she wanted to. And I think we'll probably see that across everybody, but I'm going to put a pause on Kenny's story now, and I'm going to move over to Shamsa. I'm also going to move over to Shamsa because in my 40s, my hearing's not so good. I've been going to these nightclub things. I don't know if anyone's been to any. Do wear ear protection, because I'm not so good at the hearing thing anymore. So I'm going to just be a little bit closer to her while she talks. No, all good. I'm just going to be here next to you. I'm your little friend. From your perspective, then, let's make the statement. You were one of the first female DJs in Jordan, which is fucking incredible.
Very difficult.
Big up for that as well, for sure.
I haven't been to my country in 4 years. You might imagine why. It's been very difficult, but yes.
Oh, thank you.
I can luckily say that.
So, do you want to tell people about your experiences?
I'll make it really quick, and so I can jump to the more important points I want to share with you. So, as you might have heard, I started off a very diplomatic uprising. My mother, who pushed me to learn 5 languages, and I turned down an offer from the King's Royal Office to become a political analyst. It was between that or do we go to Berlin and become a DJ? And then I was thinking, do I want to put the skirt on and be like, hello, Your Highness, hello, Your Majesty, every day? And, with all due respect to my families. Yes, it was between that or that. So before then, I was already coming to Germany and I was already partying in these places and these platforms that I was starting to feel more safe, more relevant, more alive, because why would anyone put their mind and heart when they find a better alternative, right? And for me, I was a party goer. I used to live in Kiosk, Katablau, when it first opened. I remember befriending and becoming part of the family at such an early age. I was like, and going back to my master's programs and my politicians programs. And so at some point in Jordan, Amman, I was looking at all my male peers who have already done that for a long time. And I was like, why don't we have any females playing here? And so one person, may bless his heart, took me under his wing and said, why don't you just start playing? Let's see what you got. And I was already collecting music for so long before that because I was coming to Berlin so often. And then that turned into, okay, girl got taste, girl can play, come here. And then slowly the training started, but obviously it wasn't at a level that I would love or imagine or see, because when I was back here home in Berlin, I would see the collectives meeting together in studios, people having the real motivation to train you and to make you a protege or to like train you for the future. And I didn't have that. That was missing, because as soon as I was starting to get good, the male peer who was already taking me under his wing was like, this is a risk. This is a real risk, because if this girl blows up and she's the only girl in town, she's going to be taking the market, in a sense. Yes, and we do have the atrocity because back home it doesn't exist, right? And it only existed like decades before me, and it was hip-hop, R&B, and these women already stopped because of the connotation around nightlife work or even entertainment in the night. You are looked upon as either a devil worshiper, into this, you're called names and they're not pretty. And coming from a family that is not, I wouldn't say conservative in a sense, they are very conservative in culture, right? So we respect the culture that we grew up in, not necessarily religious or extremist in any kind. It's just like, when my grandmother didn't even let me study, for example, hospitality or to become a hotel manager, that's the first thing I ever wanted to become, because that was the most international thing for me in that time. And some people, I've seen them work, and it was such an open chance to be internationalist, in a sense. And I've always had it in me because of my father, may he rest in peace. So in that sense, I wasn't even encouraged to go behind that, because how can you have a woman that's going to clean because there are stages before you become a hotel manager. You have to go through the whole kitchen, the cleaning the bedrooms and toilets. And my grandma was like, no, that's not a job for you, baby. No. So let alone me and my family putting so much effort into the line that they thought I'm going to go to, and then getting that contract or that offering from the highest office in the country, and then telling my family, no, I'm going to go become a DJ. So that was quite a shock, even for them and for me, because I thought I had to give up on so much effort of learning, and where's it going to go? And even for the first year, I was like really depressed, because I didn't know how to utilize all of that within my music, but then I just needed some time alone, because eventually that's what brought me to this stage, is that the love of music that I've had since I was a child, that I was finally like, I'm going to choose me. But even with that, there was a year depression, because my mom was like, what do I tell people? How do I divert the story of being so proud of my daughter that's getting here? And then now, do I tell them you're a wedding DJ, or what is it? What is a DJ? What is an event curator? What do you mean you're in the night till 3-4 a.m. in the morning? I don't understand what you're doing. So she was kind of a bit ashamed of the connotation, because she did not understand. But in my beginning, because I was started at Casablanca kiosk, so it wasn't the banging hardcore electronic music. It was much more musical, much more. Integrated with culture. There was a lot of more sounds and more sampling and loops of other organic sounds. So for me, it really caught my ears that I can mix it with something that is Orientalist for where I come from, right? And in that sense, I was able to start slow, which was good for my mother, because I could finally invite her to a poetry/electronic music night. I was able to finally bring that up to the cultural ministry in Jordan and be able to give a live show back then with Shkoon. They were doing the live, and I had another friend who was a poet, a very famous poet. I was able to do a whole live set, an hour long, with poetry, and it was standing ovation. My mom cried that night, and then she was like, now I know, okay, I understand, so you're not a wedding DJ. I'm like, no, I'm not a wedding DJ. And then from there it grew, and I was able, she was able to proudly invite her friends to come see what I'm doing, because now it's art, it's not just at night, right? And there was the other dilemma.
So you're not a wedding DJ, just to get that clear.
I did play for some people here, but they're close to my heart.
But I think there's one really good point there, which is a lot of the time we don't realise that it's not just the external culture that is biased, but also the internal culture. I was in exactly the same situation where my parents still just know that I work in the music industry. They've got no idea what actual jobs I've had over the last few years, and for years there was definitely a sense of shame that I worked in the music industry, and that as a a Sri Lankan immigrant in England, they would have expected me to be a doctor or a lawyer. And so these things also hold you back from achieving in our industry when your expectation of your own culture is that you're not part of something that you really want to be a part of. And I think that leads on to Kavan's story very, very nicely, because Kavan started out in Singapore. What was it like starting out in music in Singapore?
So I have been a promoter since 2009 in Singapore. And then thereafter, I was running a bar. I was given a chance to run a bar in Singapore. And within 6 months, I'm proud to say we earned about $2.4 million in gross. And we managed to use that money to set up a club. However, in between that, it was, when people speak about Asians, we also have our own internal racism against each other. So there's a few factors, right? So when we did the bar, when we did the clubs, I had bosses to report to. I can't have too much of one race, otherwise you'll be branded as a place where there's going to be a lot of fights, there's going to be a lot of gangsters, or there's going to be too much people wearing shirts, for example. So it was something which I had to, in my aspect, how I managed to ensure there was a diversification within the races in Singapore. I had to make sure there was an equal amount of Chinese, there was an equal amount of Malay, there was also an equal amount of expats, just to keep the energy so-called stable and prevent, any stigma or whatever it is. So in that sense, it was difficult for me to, to do that, as well as I don't know if I sort of spoke to Terry about this as well. Not being, when Black Lives Matters happened, so one of my friends said to a fellow Asian woman, "What do you think about Black Lives Matters?" And she answered, "All lives matters." And I understand that's pretty taboo, or that's wrong to speak. But in a sense, this is within the music industry, of course. It was I'm sorry to say, it was a white person who was insisting that Black Lives Matters. But for me, as a non-pure Chinese, I could understand why she was facing that issue. So let me just explain why. She married a person from a Western country, and she had a kid together with him. And the child that they had is considered a non-pure. I'm not going to mention any, one of the Asian races, which is very traditional. And her family and even her relatives are ostracizing her because her child is not of pure blood. And even she gets ostracized herself. So I could understand why she said all lives matters in that sense, because I knew and I could empathize, because during my childhood as a non-pure Chinese, I had my bag thrown in the dustbin every 2 weeks. I was spit on because I was in an all-Chinese boys' school, so a lot of toxic masculinity there. But the thing is, I could empathize, and this is what I sort of wanted to tell everybody about is, there's racism out there, but we also have our own problems and even like intersectionality problems, and also within racism within our own, as what you would say Asian, but Usually, I do not like to generalize and say Asian because we all have our little cultures, backgrounds, and foundations of where we are from. So yeah.
Well, I think we've got three different cultures that have the same the same attitudes. But moving over to Shani, as a young person getting into the industry and making your moves in the industry, what are you feeling about the position right now? Do you still feel there are a lot of challenges, or are you seeing some of the changes that are coming in helping you to get a grip on things?
I think, just as a quick answer real quick first, I think there are some changes. My first, the idea of Through the Grapevine came about through me actually trying to get a job position. Like my first take out of high school trying to get into the industry, I tried to get in it in Berlin through radio. And that interview was interesting. Long story short, I didn't get the job, but it was a weird situation. I had applied for it. I did a little bit more than was actually expected of me to apply. Kind of like always, like as an African American, what's always told is like you always have to do twice as much to prove yourself or show what you had on the table. So I was trying to show them how creative I was and how versatile I was in my abilities by doing a segment. I wrote like a segment for them, the radio station, that was I thought was culturally and zeitgeist specific for the time. And I did that in German, and I did another article column in English about politics. Long story short, what was kind of told to me was like, first, I was really nervous for the interview, so I was switching between English and German, but I am very fluent in German and English. And they were just telling me, first, the character of the black guy who doesn't speak perfect German is kind of like played out. It was the first little hit to my heart because, I only realized this later, but who I wasn't a character or an archetype that I was playing. It was who I was all the time. And it was just unfortunately that moment I couldn't show you how good or well spoken I was in your language. It went on to go to say something to me that I didn't really understand. And to this day, I'm not going to say it, but I still try to question that. And then to tell me, I think we would have to invest a little bit of time into you. And those 2 points of first, you're the character that I am, or the person I am, is kind of played out. And also that you would have to put resources or time into me or building me in is the two things that kind of hit me. And demotivated me actually in going that direction for a while, but essentially it brought me to the idea that I guess was always flirting with, was like creating my own thing creatively. I'm very deeply inspired by artists anytime, especially if they're like really not well known, or if I know them personally and they create music that is that I find amazing or original. It inspires me to actually do what I want to do, and it hypes me, and it makes me want to be always the first person to kind of let other people know, like, yo, look at this artist or look at this person because they're fire. And so it kind of caused me to, I kind of was faced with the issue that I think you were talking about as well, that I didn't think he was racist, but rather than the lens that he was operating under caused him to, in a way, be biased. And at the same time, I asked myself, would your answer have been, I might have to put work into you, the same answer for someone else who wasn't colored? Because I know other people who are in the industry, who've gotten jobs in the industry, who definitely weren't confronted with such an odd conversation trying to get a job. And I know a lot of people who get jobs in the industry who have zero idea what they're doing, and they're still given a chance through connections or through someone they know. So I think the first thing I was confronted with was the fact that I kind of felt like alone in this regard, and that I would have to try to navigate myself in that environment by myself as well. So it's been a lot of learning by doing, or rather learning by, I'm not going to say learning by falling, because when you fall, you get back up. You have to get back up. That's essentially always the instinct. So it's been a lot of learning by falling, a lot of like figuring out how to do what I want to do But right now, if we're saying like this year specific to 2021, I think there are definitely some visible changes that we see in the music industry, specifically talking about now in Berlin. There's a lot of more people of color lately, visibly in these positions. I don't think it's only because of like the Black Lives Matter and the spark we had because of George Floyd. I think it also has to do with basically a new generation of kids or people like me growing up, becoming adults, and then interjecting themselves in the industry. At the same time, that was a big push last year with George Floyd and stuff. Unfortunately, I'm kind of pessimistic with these things, so I question the performativeness of a lot of people, industries, companies. I've seen in a lot of different industries how they did like a double take once they like employed a few people, and then after that they kind of let people go. But I'm getting a lot more opportunities I've seen recently, but I think it's because of the people in higher positions now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said, I mean, everyone here has mentioned various enablers that have helped them along the way, and there's definitely, a tip to bring forward. But I think one point that you've made quite clearly there is, we often talk about unconditional bias, but in this case, the bias against you was really somebody thinking we already have a black guy that doesn't speak German properly. Do we need a second one in? And the reality is anything where we're being inclusive requires us to think about treating people differently, because the way that we expect to be treated is based upon our cultural background, and it is an additional tract of work that we have to build into our everyday way of life and how we deal with people. I'm going to switch to another question because I'm conscious of time here. But the question really is going to be based, and it's to everybody, it's going to be based around positive action, and do we believe that positive action is influencing change? So positive action are measures which are targeted at protected groups in order to enable or encourage members of those groups to overcome or minimize disadvantage. So an example that I would use would be around 6 years ago as an industry, we really started to focus on female DJs and the fact that they were underrepresented in the industry. By creating a discussion around this, we fueled a movement. More female DJs got booked and even more women were inspired to DJ. Fast forward 6 years and we're definitely not equal, but there have never been more amazing female DJs and more women that are interested in DJing than today. So for me, that's a massive example of a pro for positive action. But open to the panel, what do we think about positive action today, and who would like to lead? Kenny?
I think there's been a lot of positive action that has been taken for sure, but it definitely is one of those things where it's about equity and not equality. So a lot of people of colour or any marginalised group, they're already starting on the back foot. They're already starting with less of the pie. So how are you going to give them more of an opportunity to own more of the pie, if that makes sense? So having as many white males on a lineup as you do any other non-white male is not equity. It is just giving more people the opportunity to be on a lineup without thinking about how they will grow in that space and how we will actually get to an equal level playing field. And that means that, yes, you will have to employ people, more people who are marginalised in spaces and kind of take this like affirmative action. Yeah, you have to do that because there is not enough people in these spaces, full stop. So just hiring one more is not really going to create proper systemic change.
That's great. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I mean, my personal background and my personal views on many of what you're saying is completely different. Because I do come from a very organic climb up, and I'm not in the digital world of the hype whether my name is on a lineup or not. I feel like the best advice I can give first of all, yes, I see a lot of positive changes happening. For sure, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Terry. We talked about how, yes, even if it's not an organic placement, it is motivating the eye. To have more females, for example, or more people of color, I would say. It is motivating for the general public's eye, but I feel from my personal perspective is how do we enforce more positive changes is I would go back to Kenny's word about building a community organically, whatever kind of person, whatever background you have, you should not just rely on the digital hype of placement. I see that again affecting positively and having a positive enforcement because now many people back home that did not accept being in my same circle for their reputation purposes are now praising me or now I'm validated. That's a great part on it for sure, but I do not think that we need to rely only on the industrial part of placement because there's some kind of inorganicness in that sense. I feel like my personal experience placing myself and challenging myself and saying, no, there are alternative ways of placement, my way. Build your community, build your surrounding, don't be afraid, don't be apologetic. Yes, I feel a privilege to be here. Just the fact that my wife can be here in the front row, that is already a privilege of my intersectionality being in Berlin in such an open space. I'm already thankful for the placement of myself here and the world, you know. But again, we should not just rely on these digital platforms because it's not building on the long run. Any cycle you put, any kind of energy will come back and bite you later, right? And what we need to do is, like I asked Lindy, for example, how she found me, because I was approached by many promoters and many agencies, and sometimes for me, it's like, how did you find out about me? Did you just look Arab, queer woman? Do you want to just put me there? Am I just a placement for you? Or am I actually a story? Am I actually an organic placement? Am I actually good? Do you like my music? Do you like my production? You know, where do you hear about me from? So I turned down most of these offers, even from big agencies. My friends were shocked. But I was like, I'm not just these labels. I'm actually a person, a human being before all of these. I have put myself here. Thank you. I know my value. So I think in that sense, it's very important to not rely on the positive effect it has, but not on the actual organicness of the position. And that's where I come in. I'm not on the online, I'm not on the underground, I'm in the between. So, and there's a lot of like me, a lot of people like me in the in-between that do not want to feel forced to build a hype on somebody else's platform just to be validated. And I'm working on it. I'm working on. Thank you, and that's another thing. I thanked you a lot, and I thanked Lindy and the organization and institutions. I cannot imagine how much, and that's what puts me on the stage and why I get motivated. There's so many people working night and day to bring up music in general. It is no longer a commodity. To me, it's essential. These are night doctors. These are night healers. The force behind the bars, the management team, the people listening all the time. These are soldiers of the night, and we need to now and forever raise that value of our lives. We are not. You know, you go to a doctor in the morning, but who do you go after work to? I'm sorry, you come to us. So it's time we actually work on the organicness of that and really represent ourselves in a better way, because if we do keep continuing working on the hype, we're just blowing our image for ourselves, right? So yeah, that's my point.
Without a doubt, it's definitely not the only thing that we need to do to survive, but it is something that is positively contributing and making a difference. We are running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly touch on a point. I think in conclusion, it's plain to see that multiple aspects of our identity lead to preconceptions and unconscious bias that we have no control over. It's also clear that there's no quick fix. We need to all stick together, and when I say all, that doesn't mean minorities, that means everybody. It's not about the minorities clubbing together and coming up with a plan. We need to openly talk about it, and we need everybody to be bought in on what we're doing. The measures need to be clear and we need to make a change, but diversity and intersectionality need to stay in the front of mind pretty much indefinitely. This is not a project for this year, next year and the year after. We need to continually have this front of mind, and if we can do that, then we will make a dent in the culture of discrimination that is going on, and you know, it's only going to be a dent. We have 5 minutes less, so I'm going to open it out to see if anybody's got questions for people on the panel. Does anybody have any questions?
Don't be shy.
Yes, yeah, you know, we can go in panel as well, but wait a second. Yes, please. Do we have a mic for the crowd?
Oh, thank you. Hi. So I wanted to know a little bit about your approaches on including maybe socioeconomic marginalized people. I heard a lot about your journeys through your cultural and sociocultural identities, and I wanted to know a little bit about your economic backgrounds and also how you possibly manage to include or support socioeconomically disadvantaged artists or people who can actually be professionals but can't necessarily afford to be.
I think if you could maybe try to say that again. We were kind of having...
I think from what I heard, we're going to have to do a call and response here. Can you say yes to this? So I think the question is, what can we do for people that are socially disadvantaged and don't have don't have access to things? So are there things in process there? Does anyone from the panel want to kick off on that?
I have something short to say to that. I mean, I feel like that was something that I went through, or at least am still kind of going through. And I feel like I put a lot of, I've learned that I think mentorship is really important, and I feel like this can help in these instances, kind of like you already had, like you also had. You had someone who believed in what you did and was ready to invest in you. And the key word of that is invest. If it's time, if it's economics, if someone believes you enough, they will do that. And I feel like that's kind of my take on that, which would help individuals in that type of situation best. Definitely would have helped me, and I think that I put a lot of value in that. My answer.
No, I kind of echo what you're saying. I think there are programs out there. You just have to search really hard, but there are really great people doing really great things. Hopefully more of this pops up, so it's not so like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But I met Jane III through David Laub at a day that Sonos was putting on in London, where you could meet an interesting person and you could do a talk where you could, if you were into A&R, you could talk to an A&R. If you were into radio plugging, you could talk to a radio plugger. Whatever, it was like 15-minute speed dating sessions. And David Laub, he studied, he was I think Tiny Temper's manager, and he studied anthropology at Oxford or Cambridge, one of the two. And so he was a bit like, yeah, I studied economics. So we kind of bonded on the fact that we're not these like typical music industry people, but everyone closed the door on us. And so he took me under his wing, and then he gave me to Jane, and then here I am. But it is that. So like, if you're determined, find it. Like, I think ultimately people then start to give back. And for me, every single thing that I do, my company, there's a CSR and giving back element. And if you need any help, then you can just hit me up and I can try and help you.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I was going to ask Kavan really quickly, because as a veteran of the Berghain Club, it's very interesting for me to see the placement of newcomers. I'm just wondering, because of my expertise as a DJ, curator, a producer, what is happening with the selection of DJs, especially, I mean, not downstairs, upstairs, panels more, house more, the umbrella is wider, and there seems to be a lot of new names. In my perspective, many that have not passed yet through the grace of experience. And I think as an institution, I look at it as a university where I go to school. And sometimes you go and you learn, And for me, I just want to understand, is it the inclusivity that we're looking for more than the actual experience now, just to be able to be hype or invite the hype? Or invite the younger kids. I'm a queer kid, right? And for me...
And the answer to this question, if anyone wants to know it, please join us off stage, because unfortunately we've just run out of time.
Good question.
The answer is out there. And anyone who wants to know the answer to this, please give a round of applause for our wonderful panelists today. And if anyone wants to know the answer to that question, we're just going to be over here having a coffee. Thank you so much, everyone.